Welcome to the Uncensored Unprofessor, a podcast where I want to think more deeply with you about Christian faith and life. Hey, all you believers, you non-believers, you unaffiliated believers, sort of believers, even you think I'm a believers, welcome. Welcome to the Uncensored Unprofessor. Welcome all of you non-university unstudents. Thanks for joining me today. I have a very special guest with me today, but first I need to make some shout-outs. You've heard me say it before, but I'll say it again. Those Facebook shares help me get the word out. All you do is click on a UU Facebook post, an advertisement I put up every day, and share that with your friends. And it just helps get the show out there to people who may not have been aware of it. So thank you, Sue B. And thank you, Ashley W., for those recent Facebook shares. It means a great deal to me. Thank you all of my Patreon homies, my true supporters. You guys encourage me daily with those Patreon support monies. And for $5 or more a month, you get some UU stickers and a coffee coaster that will nicely adorn your listening station as you tune into the Uncensored Unprofessor. At Patreon, for $20 a month or more, you get the coaster, the stickers, and a nice Uncensored Unprofessor coffee cup. Would you prayerfully consider supporting the show? I can't tell you how much those monthly subscriptions, those monthly pledges mean to me. You can do as little as $1, $2 a month. You can do what some of my top donors have done and pledge $50 or $100 a month, but it all adds up and I'm deeply appreciative. Before I get to the interview proper, I just need to let you know that there are occasional and slight sound issues with this recording. My mom lives on a farm in the Willamette Valley, and it's not the case that her internet processing capacities are always top notch, but I think there's enough here that you will get the enjoyment and the gist of our interview nonetheless. This is fun.
It is fun. It is. I feel so important.
If we can make it work, it'll even be better. So I have a very, very special guest with me today here on the Uncensored Unprofessor. My mom, Valerie Tenney. Welcome to the show, Mom.
Well, thank you, Ed. Thanks for inviting me.
I have all my life known that the philosophical side of me, the questioning side of me, the thinking side of me, all of that probing and academic intellectual side of me comes from my mom's side of the family for the most part. And so it's fun to have you on the show.
Well, I apologize for that.
Yeah.
That's not an easy life to live. That life that insists that you know all the answers, and even harder if you feel compelled to share all the answers.
Yeah. We all know those people who have all the answers, right? They need to share them all the time. So I want to ask you some questions. I'm interested in light of an episode I did a couple podcasts ago, and it mostly followed from conversations you and I have had for years about why are people so tormented in a world that has it so good. It seems like people are more irritable and more wound up and more high strung than ever, even though things are so good. And you came from a fascinating background. In fact, why don't you tell us where you grew up and what was that like?
Well, I grew up real close to where you are right now, just not too many miles across the river over in Owyhee County. I moved there when I was 12 years old and moved there when I was 10 years old, spent 7 years out on the desert. We moved a itsy bitsy little tiny trailer that my dad had built out onto the desert on a 320-acre mining claim, if you will. There was absolutely nothing there but sagebrush. There wasn't even a road in at that point. We built the road after we moved in. The last quarter mile, chopped it out of the sagebrush and the rock. But we moved out there because my dad had been sort of an itinerant sign painter all of my life with him, and he wanted a home for his family, but he was very asocial, if not antisocial, probably more antisocial, didn't like to be around people, was mistrustful of society in general. And the idea of living out on the desert, while it would have horrified lots of people and did horrify lots of people, it was just right up his alley. So we moved out there, and we were intensely poor by design. It was on purpose. It was part of his mindset. He had come out of New York City. He had come out of not a wealthy family by any means, but a comfortable family, and his family roots in Russia were quite comfortable. But he hit high school, well, he came out of high school and hit college age just into the Great Depression. And he spent the next several years either on the rails riding the freight train, or the last few years in the hills of Northern California mining for gold. And he loved it. He liked it. He found real, true peace and joy in those years in the mountains, and wanted to pass that on to his family. He didn't want to move us back into a commercialized, over-civilized environment. He wanted us to know what living by nature was about. And it didn't suit everyone in my family. My older sister was resentful of being isolated out in the desert. My younger brother was embarrassed by it. He thought there should be many, many more goodies than there were. But it spoke to my soul. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the solitude. I loved the living in harmony with the seasons, with the days and nights. It fed me in ways that I don't know other people who see life the way I do because of those years out on that desert. So it was unique. Everybody's got a unique childhood. I figured that out after all the years, but it was unique in ways that were so rich, that we're so blessed. And part of the blessing of that was having the time, the solitude, the peace to really know who I was, and to know that I was connected to something much bigger. And the God that I found on that desert, I could never stuff that God into a church. I tried. I would go to churches, and I would hear the sermons, and I would pray the prayers, and it never worked. It was always a much, much smaller God than the God that I knew. And so the way I grew up fed me and still feeds me. My philosophy is still informed by those 7 years out on that desert so much.
So I'm curious, just to back up a little bit. Your dad left New York City. He went to Northern California, and then he went to Southern Idaho here. And was he himself religious? Or were you processing as a kid in a way that was in harmony with your dad, or do you think was he talking to you about God? I'm curious how that got unpacked.
The conversation was always about God. That was always a part of our education. It was always there, but it was his own God. His family, his father was was Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. His mother was Lutheran, and the divide there kept the children from being raised in the church. He was not raised inside the church. However, his father, as a very strong Eastern patriarchal head of household, set the tone, set the mood that raised the family. And there's no question in my mind, after all these years of being inside Orthodoxy, after I found it on my own, no question that he was raised Orthodox. The values, the principles, the mindset that he brought to our house was absolutely Orthodox. We didn't get the formal prayers. We didn't attend the liturgy. But he was, and he was a off-the-scale genius. My dad was a brilliant, brilliant man. He graduated from...
So it runs in the family.
Yes, and it flourishes in you. And I think it skips the women.
But enough about me. Let's keep talking about your dad.
Yes. Dad would have been a fantastic scientist. That's what he set off to do. He was going into the sciences. He had already mastered the sciences by the time he left high school, practically. But when the Depression hit, he dropped out of college and went on the road. But then he used that education, or that intelligence, to learn everything that he needed to know about survival. And when he had children and felt the need for religious connection, and I think that was perhaps the first time, because he'd been exploring other religions. He brought a lot of knowledge about world religions into the house. But when and it was through me, as the story goes, that he decided, he made a deal with God when I was extraordinarily sick with pneumonia, that if God would let me live, Dad would spend the rest of his life learning about Christianity.
Wow.
And the story goes that my fever broke, and he spent the rest of his life studying. And he should have gone to seminary, as I feel in later years. He didn't. He did his own exploration. He learned what he could, but he was inside the Bible all the time. And we would do family gatherings. It was part of our education, part of our entertainment. He would assign each of us a book from the Bible, from the Gospels, one of the Gospels, and we would go hunting through that for references to a specific topic of some sort. And Mark was my book, because it was short and I was little. But we were always inside the Bible. The topic was always centered around religion, but it didn't follow a formal pattern, because he didn't have one. He did not. Wasn't schooled.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
So as you think through that, and you had a very unique upbringing. I mean, I guess if we all have unique upbringings, yours is uniquer. But but you've watched, you lived through that, and that was what, Cold War era?
Well, yes, it was. I was born in 1942. I was born into World War II. I remember the day peace was declared. I remember all of the rockets being shot off. My mom took the family by the hand, and we walked into town to help celebrate the end of World War II. And then, yes, there was a peace period. There was the horror of opening up the concentration camps and what was found there. And all of this being with the background that my my grandfather and grandmother both were on opposing sides. My grandmother German, my grandfather Russian. And throughout those war years, we would sit around the family radio and listen to the news, and no one was allowed to breathe very loud for fear of missing some important detail, because this was all family. Everything that was happening in Eastern Europe was our family.
So you grew up not only in pretty abject poverty, even if it was self-chosen, there wasn't any luxury. You also grew up in a time of war and post-war, and were people, were they existentially tormented the way that they seem today?
Not at all. Not at all. I watch the chat go by on social media, and I am amazed and appalled at what sets folks off, at how important the minor irritations become. And I think back to, it was my mother or my father, I don't remember, it was early on, the phrase, "they don't have what they should do." And it was just a matter of, if you were busy enough, these things would not be important, as important as they are to you. And it was a matter of, if you're that upset about it, go out and chop some wood, which is what I was frequently told to do. There's the wood rick always needs filling. If you're really that disturbed, then go out and take the buck saw, take the hatchet, go out and bring in some kindling. It was a solution to most of my childhood traumas.
Get busy, right? It's
Yes,
interesting
exactly.
because when I would be in a bad mood or depressed, or I broke up with a girl or something, my dad would tell me, you need to go out and go running. You need to go exercise. You need to get busy. And
Right.
so you didn't just dwell in it and soak in it and mire in it and make yourself more miserable. You kind of burn some of that off by getting back to busy.
You do, and that's another topic, that we think that exercise is a good thing, and of course it is. Of course it's a good thing. But exercise is also wrapped up in part of the problem, because the exercise at this point is toward the purpose of making you healthy. You're not exercising because you need to fill the wood bin. There's not a product out of the end of it. You don't have something that you can feel really good about, proud of. You contributed to the group effort, this is all still about me. I exercise
Yeah.
because I need to get more oxygen, more endorphins. I need this. This is about me still.
That's so
And
good. So you're thinking about your abs, your six pack, how your endurance is, whether you sleep well at night, but you're not exercising toward the good of the family or the group or the town. You're not getting milk in, you're not getting the eggs, you're not plowing the field exercise that contributes to the betterment of other people.
exactly. So although you are doing good things for your body, you're not particularly doing good things for your soul, for your emotional base, for your connection to the body of Christ. You are not furthering that goal. And I say goal, and I don't want it to sound as though it should be something that you deliberately aim for. I think what we're all missing so very much is that non-deliberate existence, that you don't go do those things because there's a goal in mind. You do them because if you don't, you're going to get cold tomorrow morning when it comes time to start the fire. And there's so much thinking involved in the actions that we do. And I think we get lost inside all of that. There's no room to just be human. We have to think about it. We have to process it. We have to decide whether or not we're in step with the rest of the humans first. Do we match those people we see on television? Do we sound like them? Do we look like them? Do we have the same clothes, the same hairdo? Once we get all that in place, then we can decide what are we going to do now. But first we have to be like those other people. And that is a huge, huge difference. I saw it happen when television first came around. I'm that old. I saw television hit homes. And I remember life before television when people were unique and different, and there wasn't the stigma that comes from that. Everybody didn't have to be fixed so that they looked like each other. There was the star on movies. Yes, Marilyn Monroe was everyone's dream. This is what I want to look like. You didn't have it in front of you all the time, pretending to be real life. So,
Wow.
you
That's
know,
so
I think I've kind of summed it up in my mind, thinking about what we were going to be talking about here. I came up with the term secondhand living. We spend so much of our time living according to what is expected of us, what we think other people want us to be doing. We forget to be ourselves. We don't know how to be ourselves. Many people don't even know who their selves are to be. And all of that is a product of a life that is defined by not just even other people, because of course we are human beings, we live with other people, but other people who didn't learn how to be people themselves, because they too grew up on television and now on the social media, on advertising, on the marketplace, on all of the expectations that society drops on you. You don't ever get to just let your soul interface with the great I am.
yeah.
Which is where identity really ought to be coming from.
That is all very thick stuff. And I'm just sitting here thinking about how I know that there are tributaries that run even across the United States where people hate the McDonaldization of society, or they hate the Walmarting of society, or they hate when chain restaurants roll in, or it kind of all looks like a strip mall. But this is way more than what's going on with corporations stamping out mom and pop coffee shops or mom and pop diners. This is a whole huge, enormous cultural shift in what we do, but significantly in what it means to be human.
Yeah, I think the whole we hate Walmart movement is part of the I am better than you are movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's real. I don't buy it. I see it as, if you're going to spend your life in the market, it hardly matters which market you're being tempted by, which market is calling you to spend your money. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference which one. If your heart is in your garden, it doesn't make any difference whether you bought your seeds at Walmart or whether you bought them at the seed boutique. It really is, where is your heart? Where is your soul? Who are you? And that's a really big question. And I think there are so many people who don't have an answer for that. They don't know who they are if it's not defined by their culture, by their teacher, by their pastor. They don't know who they are because they've never had the opportunity to find out, because we don't like boredom. We want every moment filled with something. We don't want the admonition, be still and know that I am with you, is not quite the same thing as the pursuit of happiness.
Right. Yeah, that's a big distinction. Good. Keep going.
It's boredom, solitude. Out of that comes peace. Out of that comes the knowledge that we are, well, stepping outdoors into that Idaho desert, into that bowl of stars overhead, that's the kind of thing that a young child is going to absorb. It's real hard to get too terribly upset about the latest kink in your relationship if you've absorbed that into your soul. But that is so immense. That's so awesome. And then when you know that that is something that God created, that is not God, that is just a part, that's just a small piece. As I say, I could never make God fit inside the churches. My God was much, much, much greater than anything that I was encountering as it was presented to me.
So, but along the years, you, whether it was before or during, or well, it was at least before or during, you hit some agnostic years, and you eventually turned to Christ through orthodoxy.
I certainly did. And I'm here to tell you, I'm a little bitter about Protestantism because that's where the agnosticism came from. I tried really, really, really hard to fit myself into those churches because I was a deeply spiritual person. I was connected to that spirit in ways that lots of people, I won't say most, but people aren't. And I tried to make it work. I went to church and I listened and I tried and I finally threw the whole thing away. I said, if that's God, then I don't believe it. Sorry, I can't make this work. And I threw the whole thing away and I spent 20 or 30 years. I could never call myself an atheist because I knew better. But I had to call myself an agnostic because none of the descriptions that I was meeting fit what I knew was truth. And of course, I had no concept, I had no mental image of what God was, because you can't do that. All I knew was that no one was giving me one and that the images they were giving me didn't fit. And I walked into the cathedral, the Orthodox cathedral in Seattle, because my father was, or because he was Russian. I didn't know that he was Orthodox. He was actually baptized Orthodox. I didn't know that in Russia before he left. But at any rate, I walked into the cathedral. The liturgy is being held in 5 languages because of the pan-Orthodoxy that's in Seattle. There are so many different backgrounds there and ethnicities. So I only understood 1/5 of the language that I was hearing. And it was an enormous boon to me. It was so perfect because what I understand, I immediately jump to argue with. And I didn't understand anything. All I could do was stand in the midst of pure worship and praise and the incense and the choir and the candles and the icons. My soul was completely overwhelmed by an entire deliberate human construct built for no more than just simple worship and praise. And we came to the Lord's Prayer, and there was absolutely no way I could stay on my feet. I was literally knocked to my knees, and was relieved to see that other people got there too, a little slower than I did. But I knew that was where I belonged. Call it what you will, whether it was in my DNA or whether I really have found the path to the true God. I don't know how to explain it. All I know is that worked for me. I had nothing to argue with. I was swamped by things that speak to me, I suppose, is what it comes right down to, is that I'm always a little bit suspicious, a little bit questioning anything that comes in through my head. This didn't come through my head at all. This spoke to me through my body, and I know I was old enough even then to know that the things that respond, that my body responds to, are for real. and that one was real. And since then, as I've been to the services, I've been involved in the studies, I've learned more about the theology, I've tried to understand what it is that I'm involved in more. What I find is that Orthodoxy allows the mystery. It doesn't try to minimize it. It doesn't try to make this convenient for me at all, not even. If it's not convenient for me, then either I don't know enough about it, or I ought to just leave it alone because nobody knows enough about it, and we're not called upon to know about it. We're called upon to sing the praises. We're
So
called upon.
it's first a matter of assent, not first a matter of understanding.
Oh yes, oh most certainly so. Yes, yeah. The understanding, as I've figured out this very intelligent head of mine, and it is, and it just is, and that's not bragging. That is just an acknowledgement, and it's not even necessarily anything to brag about because it frequently gets in my way. What I've understood about my brain is that it will happily lie to me as long as it can make me believe that it knows what it's talking about. And so I don't give my full credibility to my brain. It doesn't get to be the boss of everything. It's not the boss. As a matter of fact, my prayer is frequently, tell my brain to shut up. Help me, help me past my distrust, because it's my head that doesn't trust, and I don't trust my head. What I know is that my heart, my soul, is fully accepting.
So that sense go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So that sense
Good question coming.
awe, or that sense of wonder, that sense of holiness that you felt on the desert, you experience, you feel it's present when you go to an Orthodox liturgy. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it depends on, am I in place? Is my spirit involved? Am I here today? But it doesn't totally depend on that, because the church is there to do that job for me. The church will reach to me and find ways to shut down the outside world so that I can worship. It does its job. The Orthodox the Orthodox see the church as a hospital. It's a hospital for sick people, sick in soul, sick in mind, sick. They're there to heal the break. And they've put 2,000 years into developing a system, and it works. For me, it is absolutely perfect. When other things turned me away, this one pulls me in. I have to tell you that Christ has been a bit of a challenge for me. The personage of Christ has taken the theology of orthodoxy to help me reach and find and understand and appreciate and love and want to follow. The Holy Spirit, on the other hand, the other leg, the other body of our triune God, the Holy Spirit is my touchstone. And we celebrated, now I'm getting into trouble on terminology, but I hope I'm talking about Pentecost.
Pentecost Sunday. Yeah.
Pentecost Sunday. I was so excited about that because I was so ready for that connection, and I walked into that church and I knew, again, that upon entrance, I knew that I was in a very, very holy place, a very special point in my life. And we went into the liturgy of adoration and praise, and and finally came to the point where we invoked the Spirit. And that whole chapel, the whole thing turned golden. And I looked at that and I said, can this be real? Am I making this happen, or is there something outside of me happening here? And I looked around at other people to see if, and the same sense of total awe of just what was written all over faces everywhere I looked. We were standing in the midst of the visitation of the Holy Spirit. And I'm here to tell you, the other time I experienced that was at Susan's wedding that you participated, where you were there, you were speaking, you were part of that ceremony. I had the same thing happen that day. The brilliance of the light, the gold. So, mysteries that I can't even begin to explain. All I can do is be in awe of them, but they are outside me, and it surely did not ever happen at the Methodist Church.
Not at the Methodist Church. So I'm so glad you shared that story for all kinds of reasons that I won't even articulate right now. But to try to wrap this up, Mom, as I think about our listeners and how they may be processing this, obviously we could say, or you could say, you need to go to the Orthodox Church. And I'm not going to argue with that, but I'm curious what you might hold out for a sometime Christian or a sort of Christian, or maybe somebody who finds himself agnostic, maybe somewhere where you were in your college days or in your semi-Protestant days. What would you hold out for them as a path toward wholeness, or a path toward holiness, or a path toward being centered and not living in the... I really think society wants us to live in a state of perpetual agitation, because then it can give us all of its answers. But I don't think that's the way to go.
I think to say society wants is too ephemeral. I think marketers want us to want their product. I think politicians want us to vote for them. I think educators want us to sit quietly or not, but anyway, don't question what we're being brought. I think there are agendas that are deliberately designed to keep us from finding out who we are. I think we find out who we are by be still, pay attention to that admonition. Every moment does not have to be filled with some kind of entertainment, some kind of stimulus. Sometimes you just be still and let it speak to you. I think it's important that you understand that your head will lie to you. What you think about spirituality is probably wrong, because your brain doesn't want you to abandon it and go someplace else. Your brain is one of the tools, and it likes being used, and it will lie to you happily to keep you involved in whatever it is that you're thinking about, as long as you think it's correct. Don't believe your brain and what it tells you about spirituality. And I say spirituality, and I use that word frequently instead of religion, because we're all spiritual, whether or not we're religious. We're hardwired to the Spirit. We are simply hardwired as human beings, probably as sentient beings, probably as mammals, probably as living creatures. We're hardwired to the Spirit. If we're at all open to it, it's going to find its way to us. And we have to be quiet enough to hear it. We have to be in the company of people who will not jeer at us as we open ourselves to that exploration. If we surround ourselves with fellow agnostics, with fellow atheists, we're going to get laughed at if we even begin to speak of the spirit that is reaching for us. We can't entertain that. There is so much out there in the world that wants to pull us away from communing with God. But I don't think that's this generation. I think that is historic. That is, the Orthodox is quite invested in the devil. There is an evil one, and I don't know what I make of that, except that I do know that evil absolutely does exist, and that it finds ways, it sneaks into the liturgy in my own head. I will be involved in the liturgy. I'll be going through it, and well, no, I can't. Yes, I can. Sexual thoughts all of a sudden are in front of me, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this never happens to me. I don't think these thoughts in the kitchen. I don't think this while I'm sitting and knitting. How is it that right here in this holiest of holy places, in this very moment, all of a sudden this is in front of me? And at that point I have to say, maybe that evil one really is trying to catch my attention and pull me away from this. So it's a matter of discipline. Discipline is a really big word inside the Orthodox traditions. You listen to your priest. You don't make these things up on your own. You don't decide for yourself which path to follow. You get some spiritual guidance. You get some help because our brains will lie to us, and because the evil one will lie to us.
That's all just utterly fascinating to me. And what you're saying there echoes 2,000 years of people following after Christ, both in the sense of the temptations and the afflictions and the lies that the enemy would bring to us. But I love the way you're talking about the Holy Spirit. That all echoes Genesis and Job and Jesus and Paul, who were all profoundly aware that it's the Spirit of God who comes to us and not just visits us, but gives us life itself. Every breath, as I'm fond of saying, every breath is a gift from the Spirit, and being still to recognize His presence is something that the whole church, frankly, just doesn't talk enough about. How to sit and wait and be silent in the presence of the Spirit of God is a beautiful thing.
Ed, this has been a fascinating experience, just trying to get my own thoughts in order, even to speak lucidly about this and not just ramble, which I probably have done anyway. But it's you're right. I don't want to use your program, your forum here as a basis to proselytize. But folks, if you've not been to an Orthodox church, I'd love to invite you.
Yeah, no offense taken. No offense taken. Like I'm Catholic. I love hearing the different perspectives of the church, and I think it's just outstanding. I think it's probably exceptionally unique for people to hear someone speak so personally of their experience inside of Orthodox Christianity. So I want to thank you so much. Thank you for all your patience with these goofy technological foibles and hassles. And thank you so much for coming on the Uncensored Unprofessor. We have to do this again sometime.
I just hate having to talk about myself. It's so difficult. You know that. So.
All right. I love you, Mom. Thanks for coming on the show.
I love you too. Bye-bye.
Well, if you listen to that, I appreciate your patience and your endurance for all that muffled sound, but now you know why I'm a theologian. My whole life has been conversations like that with my mom, and they're rich and disturbing and beautiful and wonderful all at the same time. I'm so glad you tuned in today. Please go and turn your souls and turn your brains on, everybody.